in the professional world, people always think that you have to be tough and you have to be resilient and you have to be strong in order to get ahead. And oftentimes I think that can be almost a conflict of interest, or it's in order to be that, in order to get ahead, you have to almost push people out of the way. And I wrote on a lot of my essays the importance of kindness. So I come from a banking background and I am going back into banking, a different part. And I think that for me, kindness was something that was not necessarily a value or a virtue that was highly important. And I think it should be.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to How Did You Get In? A podcast for people planning for business school, actively applying, or just curious about the process and experience. Today on the pod, we will hear from Matt Ochalski and how he used the application and essay to learn more about himself and how that authenticity shone through and got him into Booth. We hope you enjoy the show. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to How Did You Get In, a podcast focused on the real life experiences and applications of people who got into some of the world's top business schools. Today, we have one of my favorite people in the world on the podcast. We have Matt Ochalski. Matt and I met at UChicago, I think towards the very end of our time there. And Matt was the funniest, wildest, smartest, best haired person I met at school, and got to be closer and closer with him through the years of living in Chicago after school. And he is now a second year at Chicago Booth.
Yes, that's correct. Well, thanks, Julia. Thanks, Alex, for having me here on the podcast. You know, I'm super excited. Julia, like, as you mentioned, thank you for that introduction. You're making me sound way cooler than I really am. But I'm going to try and live up to that expectation. So happy to.
If you could see his hair right now, he has just such he has such good hair. I don't know, I would do some things for that hair.
I should explain that now that formal recruiting is done, I am growing out the mane. So
oh my gosh,
go back to work.
Yes.
Finally going to have to cut it, but until then, I have a year. So
amazing.
Awesome. Well, as usual, Julia is like a forever hype woman. So to kick us off, we'd love for you to share with the listeners a little bit more about your background, where you're from, where you went to, where you went to undergrad. Yes. Has been spoiled, but and then what were you doing in the years prior to applying to business school?
For sure. Well, my name is Matt Ochalski. I am a born and raised Midwesterner. I am originally from a town called Lake Forest, which is about 45 minutes north of downtown Chicago. And I didn't go very far for college. I always thought I was going to go to the West Coast and get far away from my parents, but that did not end up happening. So I ended up going to UChicago for undergraduate down in Hyde Park. And it was a very good, great experience. Close enough that my parents could, visit me once in a while, but still far enough away where they're not there every single day. So it was a good experience. Yes.
Did you enjoy it?
Undergrad or having them so close?
Oh, no. Did you enjoy undergrad? Like, did you, UChicago's got a reputation where fun goes to die. Did you enjoy it?
When I look back now, I probably have a better memory of it than at the time. At the time, it was very difficult. I like a lot of other people, was an economics major, which is, what UChicago is so well known for. And at the time, is a lot of work, a lot of late nights in the library, and a lot of problem sets. Mm-hmm. So maybe now looking back, I have a much more fond memories of it. But at the time, it was totally study mode. But also, even when I was an undergraduate, I actually was in a program at UChicago that was dual enrolled with Booth. So I was taking classes when I was 19, sometimes with people that were 29. So now that I'm back at Booth for the second time, it's very interesting to come back and be in that older position and see the students that are, not even 21 and having class with them. So it's a very different experience to do it.
That's full circle. Wow.
It is very much full circle. And you realize just how smart some of these undergraduates are that are in some of your classes. And you just are amazed at how bright and sharp they are. Yes. But after graduation at Chicago, I ended up working in banking. I worked in debt capital markets, helping companies to raise debt by issuing bonds to institutional investors. And I did that for the last about 7 years, with about 5 of those being in New York prior to coming back to Booth. And I also had like a specific focus covering clients within the tech, media, and telecom sector. So some of the big players in that area were people that were clients at the time. So it was a very good experience, very exciting to be in New York. But ultimately, I just wanted something different and kind of wanted to pivot within banking. And also, I just felt like it was a really good time to kind of come home, visit my parents, spend some time, with family again. So I knew I probably wanted to apply to business school, and that's kind of why I ended up back here at Booth.
Makes
And
sense.
so you always knew that business school was in the cards, or it was when you realized you wanted to make a pivot?
No, I honestly never realistically thought that I would go back to business school. I never really saw it as me, like something that I needed to have. So especially within debt capital markets, an MBA is not necessarily something that you really need to advance within your career. Like you can make a very good, career and move up the ladder without that. So for a long time, when I first started, I never anticipated me going back to school. I thought I would just stick at a bank and if, maybe switch banks, still doing DCM. But ultimately, I think that my interests just kind of changed at a certain point, and the easiest way to make that transition and get the skill set was to go back to business school and to make the connections. Maybe it's a little bit easier to have the, banks come to you when you're recruiting at a business school rather than me having to much more proactively try and form connections. So never was in the cards though originally.
Makes sense. How did you manage? I remember your crazy late nights. I feel like
Yes.
when you were doing banking, it was intense. How did you manage doing an application for business school? And I think you applied to more than one while
Yes.
going through banking, because that's no small feat.
Yes, it was very, very challenging at the time because I was still working a lot of hours, probably about 90 hours a week. And so it was really challenging, and I had to really just focus on, when I'm at work, I'm at work, and when I'm not at work, I have to devote all of my energy kind of into different parts of the application. And I'll be completely honest, the thing that really saved me is knowing that I wasn't going to rush the process. I really wanted to take as much time and do it well and have all my application like components done and not be trying to finish something at the last minute. So I really planned for this. When I knew that my interest changed and I wanted to go to business school, I said, okay, what's a realistic timeline? So I think it was probably 18 months to 2 years of me, whether it be studying for the GMAT or GRE. I initially started at the GMAT and then decided I'm going to take the GRE because I think I do better, in that format. And then thinking proactively, even who are my recommenders going to be for these applications, and do I have a good enough relationship? So I'm a planner by nature. I thrive in a setting where I can like schedule my time and think proactively about something. And so that is something I think that really helped me in the application process, is being organized early and sticking to a timeline.
Did you do that?
That's really impressive. No, I'm just saying, like, I was not working 90 hours and was like, I was struggling to do business school stuff after work. So that's, yeah.
Yes, I have no free life. My weekends were probably definitely devoted to studying for a lot of the tests and just, when I had time, trying to work on a lot of my essays.
You were super focused. I remember I don't think we saw you for several months. How did COVID coincide with your application process? Was it were you already kind of in the middle of it and then COVID hit?
Well, I was at the very early stages, and Julia, I even went to go visit you at Harvard. And when I was at the very beginning of my process. So probably in fall of 2019, I was still trying to do my due diligence on which schools I was going to apply to, and slowly trying to visit schools. I was in New York, so trying to make the trip up to Boston, or, I knew some of the schools like Kellogg, and I knew Booth from the Midwest. Like, what were the other ones, whether it was Wharton or whether it was, Dartmouth, like, anything going to NYU or Columbia. So trying to tick those off and see them in person. That was in the fall of 2019. And then we know what happened. Yes. And then we know what happened in spring of 2020. So, I was supposed to visit a lot of schools in the spring. I was initially supposed to visit some friends at, various schools, and, not in the dead of winter, but COVID completely changed that. And I would say that COVID actually helped me. Business slowed down in 2020 a little bit, and things didn't pick up until 2020. So I did a lot of work and a lot of due diligence in 2020 when I maybe had a little bit more free time. So it benefited me from that sense, because work was a little bit lighter.
But also from like an isolation standpoint,
Yes.
you like were drowning, and like, yeah, I can imagine like in a New York apartment, and it got hit by New York so hard. You were just like, work, business school work,
you can't
no
go
friends.
Anywhere. Yes. And you can't go anywhere, really. So what else is there to do but work on your applications, study, and you go on TikTok for some fun at the very early stages of TikTok, when TikTok was all about learning the dance moves. Yes.
Yeah. Did you post some dance videos yourself?
No, I'm horrible at choreography. I cannot, to save my life, do the choreography. I watch the TikTok videos. But no, I am not one of those people that can, I'm no Charlie D'Amelio here.
Okay, but he can reference the TikTok stars who do it.
Yes.
Yes. But if you planned far in advance, I bet you could.
Yes.
Maybe.
That's amazing. So you have this 2-year process, right? Where you kind of talked us through the early phases. You were looking at the different schools. What were you looking for when you went to go visit? What were some of the things that were check marks, or like, I'm not feeling that?
I think that I was really familiar with Booth, and I knew what Booth was like. And so everything kind of was somewhat in comparison to that. So I really wanted a really strong alumni community. I really wanted also, I didn't necessarily want to be in a rural setting. I really wanted to be a more urban campus, where I thought it's better maybe from a networking perspective, and to be able to, launch your career. Just from my perspective, that was something that was very important to me, is being able to travel and network. I also think that just a general sense of community, like where do I fit in? And I did look at a lot of other schools as well. Like, I did not, Booth and was not just the one end all be all. But I think that the sense of community, alumni, and realistically access to, career and job opportunities were kind of the factors that really influenced me the most in looking for, a school.
What was the final list of the schools you ended up applying to? So it was Booth, obviously.
Yes. Booth and Kellogg, just from a perspective of family being here. HBS, Wharton, and MIT, and NYU, Stern.
It's a long list. It's a lot of schools.
It is a lot. Yes. I might have bitten off more than I could chew during the process.
I hear the nervous chuckle. Oh yeah, too much. Yes. Yeah, it's hard.
It was a lot.
Hard.
Yes.
Especially, I think people think that essays are all really similar, but from my knowledge, and I don't remember what Booth's was, but like the essays, you cannot copy paste. Tell me a little bit, or tell us a little bit about your process for approaching the applications, and specifically writing the essays.
Yes. Again, once I knew that the application was going to go live, start looking at what are the different components of the application, specifically within the essay, and where is there overlap, if any. So I knew even very early on, talking to friends, for instance, that MIT had a video application. like a video component of the application. And so I actually knew I was going to need to do that and film that very far in advance and had to brainstorm ideas. So trying to just be proactive and get things done that you know is coming up, trying to the extent that you can share parts of applications. And then also, I think that for me, the brainstorming is very much something, because it's part of the planning and I'm a planner by nature, is something that I think was really important to me. So spending time listing out your ideas for each prompt saved me to really be very focused in what was the story that I wanted to tell for each application, rather than going through a lot of drafts and writing and hoping it to come out, in that type of freestyle form. So planning and realistically just doing that brainstorming much earlier, maybe than, certain other people like to do it.
Yes, the month before or something like that. No, that's awesome.
Yeah. And were you by yourself in this, or did you hire a professional consultant?
No, I thought about hiring a professional consultant. I definitely thought about it. And at the end of the day, I just felt like I had so many people that had gone through the process prior to me even applying. So whether it was somebody like Julia, or whether it's, some of my friends that are at Wharton, or some of my friends are at Kellogg, or, even people that maybe I, knew had went to Booth before, trying to make use of people that had been through the admissions process before I was even applying, and getting their feedback on what were things they wish they knew before they had applied. And then, trying to bribe them with a beer or a dinner to read my essays and maybe look over my resume and, ask some favors in that way. But I never formally hired an admissions consultant. No.
Your essays were, I read one of them. I read the HBS one, and it was a pleasure to read. It was, I don't know if you wrote about the same thing for Booth. We'll get into it, but it's such a fun way to learn about your friend from a different lens and how they talk about themselves and how they see themselves versus how you see them. It was awesome. I remember your essay specifically and like wanting to go into entertainment, and I loved it. I think you started with talking about your trips to Disney World. Am I right?
Yes.
It was a great essay. It stuck in my head.
Yes. So I've always been a big Disney fan ever since I was little. I've been to several of the parks around the world, and my family always does a trip to one Disney theme park around the world every single year. So my parents even go without me and without kids. And my parents are close to 70 and they go on their own, just my mother and my father. So,
love that.
It's kind of funny that they still do that even when I'm busy or my sister is busy. But that was something even that I had included in my video application to MIT. It was February of 2020. And I knew that I wanted to do something very interesting for the MIT application. And I had kind of asked Julia prior, like, what was the MIT video component? So I had an idea on time, and this is right before the pandemic hit. And I still remember going to Disney World in Florida, like towards the end of February, before things started to, we all know.
Crazy.
Yes. And I was able to film part of my admissions video in Disney World right before all of it was to close down. So that was kind of a fun thing. And I liked that portion of the MIT application because it allowed you to be kind of creative and show a side of myself that maybe I wouldn't necessarily like in a traditional application. So I think that the application writing allows you to showcase your personality in a creative way. And I think it also really forces you to do that self-reflection on like who you are as a person. Like oftentimes we're so busy in our careers and getting the promotion or just trying to honestly survive and just get through the day, get through the week, get through the month, that we sometimes don't necessarily sit down and think what is maybe next or what do we really want. And I think that the application process really forces you to do that. So I found the essay portion of the application to be actually enjoyable. It really helped me to go into business school very sure of myself. What are my values? And ultimately, what do I really want to get out of business school? So I think it's really important to set that time. Because if you come in, and from my opinion, if you come in with if you don't know yourself, you aren't going to necessarily utilize your time to the best of your ability, because it goes by incredibly fast.
Absolutely.
Oh, such a good, sorry. Yeah, I just want to, Alex, you asked the next question, but I just want to pause and like reflect on that. It's like, we talked about it in a past episode, Matt, but the idea that even if the outcome wasn't favorable to get into any of the schools, I remember like hitting submit on my last one and feeling like, even if this doesn't work out, this was a valuable exercise.
Oh, I completely agree. I in very many ways, it's a form of therapy, just being able to put down your thoughts onto theoretically paper and get them out there. And it helps you just focus and see like, what are your values even? I think that for me, it really helps solidify what are my values and what do I stand for? And what am I ultimately going to bring to any of these institutions that I'm hoping to be the next stage in my career in my life?
You're saving a therapist like a year of backstory, right?
Yeah.
Like hand them over your business school essays.
Yes. Yes.
It's like,
I'm sure they
could
could definitely dissect it. Yes. And get a lot of what I wrote. Yes, for sure.
Yeah. So what was the Booth essay prompt, or were there multiple?
Oh, I don't honestly, candidly, I don't remember that well. At a certain point, they kind of are blending together. So I don't really remember, truthfully.
Do you remember the like the main point that you were trying to get across, or the story that you wanted to tell for Booth specifically?
So I think that a lot of the themes of my essays was kind of about kindness and how somewhat in the professional world, people always think that you have to be tough and you have to be resilient and you have to be strong in order to get ahead. And oftentimes I think that can be almost a conflict of interest, or it's in order to be that, in order to get ahead, you have to almost push people out of the way. And I wrote on a lot of my essays the importance of kindness. So I come from a banking background and I am going back into banking, a different part. And I think that for me, kindness was something that was not necessarily a value or a virtue that was highly important. And I think it should be. You know, when we think about our careers, we spend so much of our time with our colleagues, our peers at work, that, you know, we have to be kind to one another, because we're all going to face moments of adversity and we're all going to be challenged. And I think that it's just so important to be kind, because you never really know what people are going through. And I wrote about that in one of my essays. I had one boss who was really outstanding. And when I really needed somebody to pick me up, I was fortunate enough to have a manager who really stepped in and was really, really kind. And I think that was something that was an example that was set for me, and something that I know I want to bring to, you know, my next position into banking. And that was really what I focused on in a lot of my essays. Just that virtue that had been shown in my prior position, something that I wanted to incorporate into Booth, just being a kind person. It sounds so easy, but yet sometimes it can be so challenging. And that's realistically what I focused a lot on in my essays and what I tried to communicate and show.
Oh, I just love that so much. I love it for a couple reasons. One, again, and this is a recurring theme, is it's authentic. It's who you are as a person, right? Like you are an incredibly kind person. You put kindness at the forefront of how you treat people. It's how you value and see friendships, I think. And I also, the juxtaposition of what the impression is of banking, or even the impression is of like MBA students, is kindness is not in the top 100 words you would use to describe either of those things.
Absolutely not. No.
And so
no.
it's Yeah, it's awesome. And I think by emphasizing it, one, you're differentiating yourself. Two, you're being authentic. And three, you're showing who you're showing and telling exactly how you're going to show up for your classmates and what you're going to contribute. And that's like so critical.
Absolutely. I think that was, something that in the essay process, like in your whole application, would be my advice to anybody applying is be authentically you, whoever that is.
Mm-hmm.
Like be true to yourself in the application. Don't try and fill a spot that you think that they want or be somebody who you think they want you to be. I think that the best essays and the most personal ones and the ones that receive the best kind of attention and feedback are the ones that are just authentically that person that you go, wow, this can only be Matt, or this can only be Alex, or this can only be Julia. That is so unique to them. So those are the best essays. And I think that's ultimately where people kind of trip up in the whole process is they think they have to be something. You don't. Just be you.
Yeah. Oh,
honestly, pretty good dating advice too. you know,
Yeah,
don't be who they think you want that, or like,
yes.
who you think they want you to be.
Just be yourself on these apps. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
dating
my
apps
God.
and business school apps. Yeah.
Also, not to fangirl, but like hearing you talk about this, I can just imagine that you would get into any of these in-person interviews and just knock it out of the park. Because you are it is so authentic, right? Like I feel like you write about it and then your kindness, it comes through, because that's to Matt's point. Like, okay, maybe you write a killer essay and you talk about kindness, but if Matt showed up and was not the kind, wonderful, like warm-hearted person you're hearing, they could tell, but he wrote about what was true. And I'm sure that like your interviews would just seal the deal because you're so both articulate, but also so your kindness comes through.
Well, I hope it does. I think that that's something also I recruited for banking and I'm going through. And as I said, kindness is not necessarily something you think about when you think of the fun, warm fuzziness of banking. But I think that like, especially in the interviews for recruiting, once you're here, like it's the same kind of lesson, like show up and be authentically you for whatever you're recruiting for, whether it's consulting, whether it's for, VC, whether it's for tech, like just be you, I think was a lesson that ultimately came from the admissions process and something that you can still, take with you as you recruit for whatever position you're trying to go for.
So who did you, Julia is obviously saying, right, as one of your friends, like that sounds so you, who did you have read your essay to like gut check, like or you had Julia read your HBS one. Do you remember who read your Booth ones?
Yes. I had one of my good friends from Wharton and that we went to U Chicago with read some of my essays as well for Wharton and other schools. And then I also had a friend of mine from Kellogg from high school read some of my essays as well. So a very wide variety of people at different schools to try and get just a diversity of opinions to see what people think. I think also I try to get my family to read them as well and just use them as a sounding board and say, I think this sounds like me. Do you think this sounds like me? And can you tell like this is authentically me was another thing. So trying to get anybody in your life, I think, whether it's family, a colleague, your peers at other schools, anybody you can get that actually knows you so well, those are the people that I think provide the best and the most honest feedback. They'll tell you, you want honest feedback if, oh, this is horrible, or you need to be more concise, or I would take this out. That's the only way you're going to get good, honest feedback is by people that are willing to be honest with you.
But you did that. I remember, if I remember correctly, you got lots of honest feedback, but you did it early enough that you could incorporate it. So you weren't hoping people would like check the box and sort of boost the ego, like, which I think we can fall into the trap of waiting too late and then being like, God damn it, I didn't really want that input. You left time to then take the feedback and make tweaks.
Yes. Again, the planning, I always felt was key. So even I may be getting ahead of myself just trying to let your recommenders even know very early in the process so they're not writing a recommendation on your behalf at the last minute. That was something I thought was super, super key, was letting people know early, whether it be your peers, that you're going to need them to workshop your essays or look over your resume, or whether it's your recommenders, just giving them kind of the prompts and helping guide them. The earlier, the better.
I have a question actually with
Yes.
in the banking world, like, do you have to keep it a secret from the people on your team that you're applying?
So again, that is, it is kind of a controversial opinion. I tried to keep it a little bit more quiet and not let too many people know. I let my recommenders were all bosses of mine, so they were in the know and they knew, and they were also very, very supportive of me wanting to take that next step, because I think they knew that ultimately, I was destined to maybe do something a little bit different. And, they saw this as kind of just improving upon myself. It wasn't necessarily like a divorce, like once you're gone, you leave the firm. I'm still very, very good friends with and talk to very frequently the people that recommended me to go to business school. So I didn't make it publicly known to everybody within the group that I was looking to make a change. So I was more selective in who I let in on that information.
Gotcha.
That makes sense. Tell us a little bit. I mean, you just referenced sort of your recommender process. Who did you pick? How did you pick them? And then how did you prep them to be the best recommender they could be?
Yes. So I had two recommenders for all the schools. One of them was our group head, our former group head of debt capital markets. And the reason I chose him was I did a lot of really good, high level, outstanding work, more strategic type work around the group that ultimately wasn't necessarily directly tied to my day-to-day job, but it was outside work that I specifically had done for him. So he could talk to one aspect of my professional life. And then I got my, at the time, current manager, who could speak to things that I was doing on a day-to-day basis and things that we're actively trying to, better our group and better our team. So two different managers. And the way that I went about asking them was, once the prompts were officially out, I made a packet with all the questions that, were relevant to them, that they needed to know for writing purposes. I put it all in a packet, and I think it gave the recommended limit or the word count that they needed to fill. I filled that out for them to give them kind of a rough guide, and then ultimately putting this kind of in a spreadsheet, and then creating a timeline for them as well. Like, okay, I think that this would be an appropriate time for you to probably have a first draft. I think this is probably when you should, realistically be close to done. And then I would love for you to submit this 2 weeks before the deadline.
Amazing.
You build in time, so that way it's not the last possible day and you're calling the school because there's tech issues and your recommender can't submit. So I actively gave them all the questions that I could with the limits, and gave them a very organized timeline on when they needed to kind of have things done by. And I think that was eliminated a lot of confusion for them and helped to streamline the process as much as possible. Because these are people that are very senior, and you are asking them a favor and asking them to spend time on a weekend, away from their families to write something on your behalf. Yep. So the easier you can make it on them, the better it will go over.
So it's so smart. There's so many nuggets I want to just highlight in what you shared. One, you were thoughtful about who you picked, and you picked people who you worked with directly. So you didn't just go for the most senior person who you sat in a meeting with, but you picked people who knew your work product and saw it in different lights, which is huge. The other thing I heard you say is that timing buffer and giving them not a false deadline, but an early deadline. Really quickly, like personal story, I picked my 2 recommenders. I gave them a ton of heads up, thank God. And the week that it was due, one of my recommenders, Claire Meehan, shout out, she's amazing. Her husband had a heart attack the week that the application was due. And she was, and he's completely fine. He was okay, but it was awful. And she sent me a picture actually of them like editing the essay together in the hospital room, which is a recommender who goes above and beyond. But I mean, she was truly like an angel saint. I owe her a lot. But not every recommender is going to do that. Like life happens, and so giving people that buffer is critical.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and being able to explain the process. So one of my recommenders, he had an MBA. He went to Columbia Business School, and he's American. But one of my other recommenders is Japanese, is not from the US and isn't really familiar with the whole process of applying to business school, and more so not necessarily so familiar with writing recommendations.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to explain like what's this for, and like what's the ultimate purpose as well. And so it was also a little bit of a challenge on the recommender front, because my recommender or group head from Japan was in Tokyo at the time. He used to be in New York when I worked for him, and he had actually moved back to Tokyo. So trying to coordinate when Tokyo is 12 hours ahead of you was a little bit of a challenge. So there were some logistical issues on trying to get things done and communication along the way, but it definitely worked out. But some recommenders, I think, will need a little bit more explanation than others. And it just depends on, if they're familiar with the process or not.
Mm-hmm. Great advice. I remember, I feel like it also depends on the personality of the recommender. Like you can give as much an advance notice as possible. And like, sure enough, the one who I thought was going to do it ahead of time did it weeks ahead of time. And the other one, I'm like literally in a one-on-one with him the day before. And I'm like, so Jeremy, I see that these still haven't been submitted.
Wow.
And I placed like multiple calendar reminders like on his work calendar to be like, hey, this is your 2-week warning, everything like that. But
People.
Yes.
You can lead the horse to water, but you can't make them drink until they want to.
Yeah. Side note,
false deadline.
Yeah.
Give that fake deadline. The side note, but what did you guys get your recommenders as a thank you? Because I think that's like an important piece. They're taking a bunch of time. Like, do you write them a card? What did you do to thank them for taking the time? Because these things, especially if you're applying to multiple schools, the questions are slightly different. It can be, it can take 10, 15 hours of this fairly senior person's time.
Yes, and even more if you're applying to a lot of schools. Yep. Like the more schools, the more they have to do. I think my one manager who was in New York, I think I did a card and a bottle of wine. Mm-hmm. And then I think I wrote a card or a really sincere email to my recommender in Japan, because this was also during COVID.
Yeah.
So the COVID times. And it's a little bit challenging to, get things across the world probably at that time period.
Yep. I think sincere card is like perfect.
It would have shown up 4 months later.
If that, yes. 6 months later. Yes. I think I did a bottle of wine.
Nice.
I think I did I did gourmet chocolates from Italy.
Those are good.
Wrote like handwritten thank you notes for both of them. I'm trying to think if I also did a bottle of wine or something, but
that's a very nice.
What did you do, Julia?
Well, I think I did a bottle of wine for one. My other recommender, Joseph Severson, again, shout out. He is amazing. He's Mormon. So it meant no bottle of wine. And so I found
So
a nice
coffee. No, just
coffee,
kidding.
no coffee. Yeah, no coffee, no soda. I he has a busy family, and so I got him a gift card to a nice restaurant near where he lived, so he could go on like a date night with his wife.
Mhm.
So and it doesn't need to be a lot, but I think just like taking a minute to just really thank that person, because if they and especially they often will send you what they wrote, and you're like, holy crap, like it takes a lot of work, and also worth sort of setting them and keeping them updated as you go through your journey, and just thanking them again,
Mhm.
just because that I think the recommendations can be a make or break.
Agreed. I think it's very interesting to see what they write about you if they let you see it after the fact, and let you see all that they said about you and all the kind words. And you sometimes look at it afterwards and you think, wow, I didn't realize that you thought that highly of me. It's
Yeah.
very interesting to see what sticks out to them also. Like what's the defining feature? How do people view you?
Yep.
Mhm.
Agree. Agree. Well, why don't we jump to now, now you're in your second year of business
Yes.
school. You were talking about how it goes by so fast. Like, tell us
Yes.
about your experience so far. What do you feel like you've gotten out of it? Some of the highlights, and then we'll talk about some of the less fun stuff, but what's been the good part?
The good parts are definitely just meeting new and interesting people from all different walks of life, all different jobs, all different, you know, very diverse backgrounds who maybe I wouldn't necessarily have been exposed to in a banking situation where it's somewhat of a self-selecting career. Like you really have to want to do it, but you just meet so many very interesting people from all different backgrounds at business school. So I've met some of the best people in my life here in my first year at business school. So there is a tradition at Booth. There is a pre-orientation trip called Random Walk. And it is a way to really meet your class before orientation even begins. So you go on a trip with 15 first years and then 4 second year leaders somewhere around the world for a week. And it's a way to really get to know your class much more intimately because you're forced in that. You really learn about people when you go on a vacation with them. So, you know, that's been one of the highlights. A lot of my really good friends have come from my random walk. I
Where'd you
went to
go?
Ireland. I
Oh,
went
Oh,
to
nice.
Ireland, yes. And I, wanted to pay it forward. So just this past year, I actually was a second year leader for a random walk. And I led a trip to Bali. So
Oh,
Bali had just
wow.
opened up, and why not? We led a trip with about 14 first years and then 4 leaders of us out in Southeast Asia. And it was a really good experience. So it's very interesting now to be in your second year because you have your old random walk, your friends from that, and then you have your new from the ones that you just made, and it's kind of introducing the two. It's a good tradition that Booth has. So that's been kind of one of the big
oh.
highlights is meeting new people through that forum.
So tell me a little bit more, I've seen, if I'm looking from the outside, just following you on Instagram and hearing also about all your stories, like it sounds like one, you were working hard recruiting for banking and you got the job. And so you did your internship. I see you traveling and sort of living it up. And you're enjoying like life in Chicago too. Like you said, you were looking for an urban center so you could,
Yes.
you weren't out in the boonies. Um, it looks all like amazing and golden. Tell us a little bit about like what's been challenging. What are some of the less pleasant surprises of business school?
Well, I think one of the challenging things is, there's always something going on, and it's
Mhm.
realistically just managing your time to the best of your ability and being selective on where you're spending your time and who you're spending your time with. You know, that's the thing is trying to like spend time on trying to do a problem set when I'm also trying to manage 50 coffee chats this season with first year students that want to talk about banking, while
Mhm.
still trying to, you know, go out and have a social life. So I think the most challenging aspect that is organizing your time. You have
Mhm.
to be good at time management because you can't do everything. I would love to go on every trip. I possibly could, but I think time and money are the limiting factors there. But
Yes. Yeah.
yes. And then ultimately it's when you do have that time, how are you spending it and using it effectively? Like, I don't want to be the type of person that just sits in front of my TV watching Netflix all day. I would hope that I am trying to go work out or do something productive. That definitely is not the case. But just how are you spending your time? This is the one time probably in most people's lives where their schedule is really dictated by themselves. When we go out probably into the corporate world again, it's dictated by our projects and our managers, and people are pulling us in so many different directions. So what are you doing with your time now when you have the most control over your schedule, and how do you use it effectively?
Yeah. Oof. Well, you still have some time right now at
Yes.
school. You've still got
one more
one
year.
more year, which is awesome.
Yeah. And now I'm like, oh yeah, I definitely didn't maximize my, or like, there's for sure things I wish I did more of, like taking advantage of more of the like resources on campus, or like talking more to professors, like things like that.
Yes.
But
I
so
give-
yeah,
I give us-
do that
I give us the-
now. Like
Yeah, do it. I give us the COVID out a little bit.
yeah,
Because
for
I
sure.
think you've had, you can, I definitely use that as an excuse too often. It's like, I'm sick. So anyway, that's amazing. And so it's out, you were talking earlier, you came to school to do this slight pivot in
Yes.
banking. Are you on track? Where are you now with your career and what you're thinking?
Yes. So I successfully made the pivot.
Woo!
And I am going
Woo!
back into banking, into New York. And so prior to business school, I worked in debt capital markets. So it is a markets facing role. It's more tied to, interest rates. You have your 6 Bloomberg screens, you're getting in at 7. And I wanted something that was maybe more inherently tied to kind of the more modeling aspect of investment banking.
Awesome.
And I'm very, very excited and very, very grateful to be going back. I had an outstanding experience, going and interning this summer there. And so I'm just very excited to meet all the people and when I do start working, to get to work.
Awesome.
It's amazing. Congratulations. Not a small feat.
Yeah. And that you've locked it up with many months to go.
Yes.
So yeah, so jealous of like the travel you'll be able to do on the breaks, and like all the fun you'll have.
Live it up. Live it up.
Less stress in your second year, knowing that you have a job and you don't have to re-recruit or try and find something else. So it's smooth sailing from here on out.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, Alex, do you want to hop to our rapid fire questions?
Ooh.
Yes.
Unless you have any other questions that you want to ask before we jump.
No. I think my favorite rapid fire question is what stereotype about your school is true? And what stereotype maybe isn't as true as you would have expected?
So the stereotype that I think a lot of people probably have of Booth is that, it can be a little bit of a nerdy place, like maybe more so than some of our peer schools. Like we are, I think at heart, we are a bunch of nerds, and we all like really do enjoy learning. Like I'm already thinking about the courses that I want to take in the spring quarter and really planning that out. There's a professor here that actually won a prize for economics, Doug Diamond. I'm hopefully going to try and take his course in the spring. So at heart, I think Booth is a very intellectual place, and it's really engaging and very stimulating. U Chicago has that saying, the life of the mind, and it's really true of all the schools at the university. So that is very true. But what I would say is somewhat of a misconception is that maybe people think that Booth is maybe too stuffy, or because it's an intellectual place that we don't have fun. No, we definitely do have fun. We definitely do go out. We definitely do take all the trips that all of our other peers, take as well. So we're a good time. That was something that even I was concerned about, and I went to U Chicago undergraduate. But I would say that Booth students, are very, very fun.
The undergrad stereotype is U Chicago is where fun goes to die, but I can
Right.
vouch, having seen Matt's recent changes in alcohol tolerance, that it is not the same at the Booth MBA.
Yes, it is very, very different. Yes. We have a tradition called TNDC, Thursday Night Drinking Club, which is one bar, where all first and second year students at Booth kind of congregate on a Thursday night. And so it can be a little
Messy.
A wild time. Yes.
Amazing. Well, it sounds like you've got your internship, so you can attend every TDNC.
Yes, I am definitely going to try to.
Amazing.
For sure.
Would you say you're an introvert or an extrovert?
I would say that at heart, I am an introvert, but that I can play the part very well of an extrovert.
Same.
I'm the type of person that I can be around people all day, but then when I come home, I need my own me time and I need my time to decompress. So I can play the parts well of both, but at heart, I think I'm an introvert.
Alex, do you want to ask the last? We'll wrap up our rapid fire.
Yeah, we'll see if you can be more or outdo the last interview. But if you had to pick a new mascot for your school, what would it be?
If I had to pick a new mascot for my school, what would it be? Ooh, that is a good one. I how about the U Chicago Booth Badgers, Beavers. I don't know. No, I can't because MIT.
I was going to say MIT's Beavers.
MIT's already, no. Okay.
I don't even know that. What is the U Chicago mascot? I should know it.
Nature's engineers. That's why MIT's a beaver.
But...
It has to be something with a B though, because then it can be like the Booth.
Okay. What is it now?
I think we're just the same as U Chicago, like undergrad. Like I think it's
What's
just
that? Oh, a phoenix, which is cool. That's like mythical.
That is cool.
Yeah.
Like it's very Gothic architecture, and I think it's still the same. So
okay. I mean, you could be. I actually don't. From what you just described about Booth, like it does have that sort of like hardworking studying aspect that like kind of gives me Harry Potter vibes, like the Phoenix, but it also is like fun and playful and magical, which is also Phoenix. So, like maybe it's one that's like appropriately picked.
I think so. Yes, I think so. And at least the one interesting thing that I try to do with a lot of the new people that come on campus is I like to give them the tour of campus because I went to U Chicago for undergraduate, and a lot of times the business school students don't necessarily leave the business school. And there's such great architecture on campus, especially in the fall when, it's beautiful weather. Like I like to lead kind of a little tour around campus to show everybody around because it's so interesting to see whether it's the Gothic architecture or whether it's something that's modern. Like there's just so much about campus outside of the business school that we as the business school students don't take advantage of. So.
Well, yes, I think that's a great note to end it on. Now, or like as someone who hasn't been to U Chicago, now I guess I need to go there and check out some of the beautiful architecture.
Go on a weekend so he can take you to the drinking.
Yeah, honestly. Julia, you want to fly out on a Thursday?
Wait until spring quarter when it will be nicer.
I'm not going until after March or April.
Probably
I've been there.
Yeah,
May is when it will be nice.
It's
good now, but no, not winter is the hardest part. Yes.
Yeah, but
but yeah, no, a Thursday night drinking club in the warm spring, late spring sounds like
ideal.
Yes,
perfect.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. But thank you so much, Matt, for taking the time. I feel like there were such good nuggets and, being authentic and genuine throughout your application and, not overinflating things. And I wish I had your planning skills.
Oh my God.
Like that's so impressive, especially like how you handled your recommenders. I thought that was great. And maybe if I'd done that, my one recommender wouldn't have been the day before, but but yeah, no, we really appreciate you taking the time, and
100%.
I think a lot of people will really benefit from your advice.
We got so many good nuggets out of this this interview with you, and I'm excited to see where you go and
Yes.
sort of like what comes afterwards and what magical trips and things you get to go on the rest of the year.
I've got some coming up that hopefully, materialize. It's just trying to lock down the details. So
lock it down.
I'll be sure to share that
Amazing.
when those actually happen.
Amazing.
Anyways,
Well,
thank you
Alex. So much.
Thank you, Julia.
Thank you. And we'll audience, we will talk to you next week. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to DM us on our Instagram page, and we'll tag Matt, follow Matt, and show him some love. Thank you. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, guys.